Well, hello, friends. Happy day after the 4th. That would be the 5th after the 4th. It's Material Issues, Sunday Night Live, episode number 263. Wow. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records, and I'm over here on what has still remained scorching South Jersey. We did have 100-degree days in a row. Today was feel-like temperature of 105. What is going on? Did we just slip below the equator here in New Jersey? I don't know. But over in balmy, cool Southern California, my good friend, Mr. David Basher, president of the International Pop Overthrow Music Festival and the upcoming IPO CD with 68 great tracks on it. David, good early evening or late afternoon to you. How you doing?
5 o'clock. I guess I consider that late afternoon.
Late afternoon, yeah.
I don't know. Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang Theory coined the term pre-evening. And I think I'm trying to remember if that included 5 o'clock or was that like 6 o'clock. I don't remember. Anyway.
I like it.
Yeah, things are fine here. You're right. It's been fairly mild for this time of year, although it's going to get into the high 80s, low 90s consistently for a couple of weeks. And then God only knows, to quote
God only knows,
one of my favorite songwriters and our guests, as to what the weather will be like after that. I'm just hoping that when IPOLA happens in early August, we don't have scorchers then, because that's happened before.
Yeah.
And that'll wreak havoc with your attendance, let me tell you.
Wouldn't it
Even
be
though
nice?
The venues are all well air conditioned, just people just get worn out from heat. And
wouldn't it be nice if the temperature was 82 degrees?
I see what you did there. Or did you do that? Speaking of which, I have
Look at your shirt.
Before I get to what I was going to say, you have something that you want to present to us now.
Oh, yeah. Listen, when you were doing IPO, when did you get these? When you were in
I actually got a bag. I got a bag in Glasgow, and I somehow left it behind in the hotel room. And I was thinking, oh, damn. After telling Mark that I got these chips, I'm not going to be able to send it to him. But then when we went up to Inverness, Scotland, one of the shops had them. So I bought 3 bags. I tried one on the air a couple of weeks ago in Inverness. And I sent the other 2 to you, and you've got one in your hand right now.
Now, over the last 5 years of 262 episodes of Material Issues, every once in a while we talk potato chips and David's love of ketchup chips, but I always talked about my love of Worcestershire sauce chips, which used to be made by somebody somewhere, and I did have them, but nobody's made them. And in David's IPO adventures in Europe, he came across Walker's Leon Perrins, which is the only true Worcestershire sauce. But they're potato chips, and he sent me a bag via the mail, and my mouth's been watering holding onto this bag for a week now, 10 days, or whatever it may be, and I'm going to give him a try live here on air, and let you know whether all my dreams have just come true with this little bag of potato chips. There we go.
Dum.
That's right on the money, man.
All right.
That is a perfect Worcestershire sauce tinged potato chip. Not too strong, not too any. It's just perfect. Oh, wow.
Oh, I'm glad you think so.
There you go. Walker's Grab Bag, Leon Perrins, Worcestershire sauce potato chips, the only ones we've ever seen.
And here's the thing, though. The only place you might be able to find them in the U.S. is at one of those shops. Hey, Tim. You might be able to find it at one of those shops that specialize in British snacks. I found one of those shops actually a couple of days ago when I was walking around Sherman Oaks and saw that they had the Walker's ketchup chips. I was hoping, and I had never seen them in the States, but they had them at this place. I was hoping they had the Worcestershire. I'm going to go back there and see if she can order some, actually.
Well, what I told you, I had found out that the singer Adele was addicted to Worcestershire sauce potato chips. And
Wow.
when she could no longer find them over in the UK, she just took a bag of plain chips, opened them up, dumped Worcestershire sauce in, closed the bag, shook the bag, and I've done that here, and it does work, and they're very good. But makes the chips a little soggy.
Yeah, this is definitely better. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you liked them.
Thank you, my friend. That was a great experience, sir.
We're going to try to find some more. Anyway, this year is the 60th anniversary of the iconic Beach Boys album, Pet Sounds. And those who think we overuse the word iconic, I don't think would object to using it to describe that particular album. And with that, and I'm glad our guest is looking on here. Hey, thank you, Starman. Because he's probably well aware of these. But with that has been a few reissues of the album, and two in particular, which have been causing quite a stir in the audiophile world, are the two I'm going to show you. And one of them is the Universal vinyl file reissue of Pet Sounds. It's a beautiful package. I got to be careful here, of course. So yeah, you've got this nice kind of little container, and the album. This is actually a reissue of the mono and the stereo. Of course, the mono being the original, the stereo being a Mark Lynette mix from the 90s. But it's got both. It's a really nice package. Our guest is showing his.
Oh, look at that! Yeah,
yeah. So really nice. I don't know that I've seen this photo before, but probably people who are more into that kind of thing have. So that's one of them. This one is going for about $55. Our guest is showing off some of his stuff. And the other one, which I just found at Amoeba Music, one of our local record shops, is a bit more expensive. It is the Definitive Sound Series version of Pet Sounds. And it comes in this box as a container. And it's only the mono version. And here's the inner. Now you'll notice that this is a Pet Sounds with a different cover. What it is the cover of the well, let me give you a little backstory. In 1972, the Beach Boys released an album called Carl and the Passions So Tough. It was on their label Brother Records. And along with it, and this is one of the most inexplicable marketing things that I've ever seen. But along with it was Pet Sounds, which had been out of print, which Capitol had put out of print several years before. All right, so people really wondered, like, why are you including Pet Sounds? The people who owned Pet Sounds were saying, well, I already have it. Why do I need it again? And the people who didn't own Pet Sounds were saying, I don't want to have to pay extra money to, especially for a Beach Boys album that frankly may not be all that good. I really like Carl and the Passions, but it took me a while to get into it because it was very different from Sunflower and Surf's Up, which I adore, as you know, first and third favorite albums of all time. Right. So people were objecting to it on all sides, but eventually Capitol in 1974 they reissued that version of Pet Sounds with that cover as a standalone. Now, why is this all not just superfluous information? Because the 1972/74 Pet Sounds was a new mastering, and I don't remember who did it. I just read about it, and I still don't remember. David will, I guess. And so that's what the DCC version has, a 1972 master, not DCC. I'm embarrassing myself here. Definitive Sound Series, DSS. That's the 1972 master. And I know this is getting geeky, but, people care. the vinyl file Universal issue has the original 1966 master. So audiophiles out there have been ad nauseum comparing the two. I played them on my system, which is hardly audiophile. I mean, it's not bad. We're not talking about a Crosley turntable here, but it's just a dual turntable from 1982. I have definitive speakers. I have a Sony receiver. No big deal. I played the two of them, and I have to say I prefer the Universal one with a 66. That's me. I think it's flatter. I think it has no doubt that the DSS version there's more definition in it, but it's got a lot more balls. Too many balls for me. The bass is a little bit too high. I like the warmer sound of the 66 version to the vinyl file. So I would highly recommend people buy that one. But that's me. You go on YouTube and you see the people who have the $20,000 systems, and they're talking about the difference. And most of them think that the DSS version is better. But I don't know. I'm kind of thinking if you have one of those systems, buy the DSS. If you have a normal, music fan system like I do, probably go for the vinyl file. It's half the price anyway, and you get both the mono and stereo as a reissue.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's a better deal. I would highly recommend that one. But let's see what our guest thinks, even if he even cares about such a thing.
He's been dying to jump in on this.
One thing we know that he cares about is the Beach Boys. He's been a passionate fan of theirs for more than 40 years, and he's expressed his fandom by publishing a magazine called Endless Summer Quarterly since the early 90s. And he's interviewed, he's interviewed members of the Beach Boys as well as ancillary people, many, many, many times. And he's written a book which contains several of those interviews. And here it is: all summer long, conversations with the Beach Boys from Surfin to Smile. And the interviews are really cool, very informative, really nice. I've had copies of Endless Summer Quarterly, but I'm sure he's not going to be happy when I say I've never subscribed. I really should. Oh, maybe I will now.
The book's got forward by someone named John Stamos.
Oh yeah, John Stamos, right. We're gonna talk a little bit about him and what people's perceptions of him are, but I'm sure that our guest has a different opinion than a lot of the Beach Boys fans out there, and his is more informed than any of ours.
Sure. So, yeah.
Anyway, without further ado, would you please give a huge welcome to Mr. David Beard?
There he is.
Howdy.
So let me ask you right off the bat, are you an audiophile? Do you care which one sounds better? Do you even own them?
Wait, before we even get into pet sounds, let's talk about, I was just up in New Jersey, and I hate that Mark and I didn't connect because I did a book signing at Words in Maplewood, New Jersey. And then I did a book signing in Ridgewood, New Jersey at Bookends.
I wish I would have known.
And but more importantly than that, the whole reason I bring those up is because I was in New Jersey, and you're talking about potato chips. I'm an Italian sub guy, so no matter where I go, I look for a great Italian sub. And I was stationed in Union, New Jersey, and I went into Union, and I went to Mr. Sub, and it was the best effing sub I've had in a long time. Okay, and it was like this long, lunch and dinner, Mr. Sub. So that's a promo. Wow.
Is it submarine? Is it hoagie?
It's hoagie.
Is it torpedo? Yeah,
it's hoagie all day long.
Yeah, I'm a hoagie guy.
Me too.
But there are those that stick by submarine, and then once you get into Western Pennsylvania, they're called torpedoes.
You can call them whatever you want, as long as they're delicious.
Just don't call me late for lunch, right?
That's right. That's right.
And all of this is way more important than pet sounds.
Exactly. It is.
But David, let me
So with
Let me
Pet
say
Sounds,
that.
I'll
Let me
just-
say
I'll
that
just
you.
show that.
Oh, nice.
Everyone's autograph except Dennis. So there's Carl,
Well.
Brian, Bruce, Mike.
Why didn't you get Dennis? No, just kidding. What was I going to say? What I wanted to say was you look really good, David. You've over the years you've obviously lost a lot of weight because when I first, you were never fat, but you were always a little bit.
Well,
Me too. But
Well,
you've lost a lot of weight. You look
okay,
great.
Well, thank you. In April of 2019, I had stage 4 neuroendocrine cancer.
Whoa.
And so I went from 215 pounds to 170 pounds quickly.
Pretty quick.
When I was in the hospital. So cancer-free. So glad to say.
Congratulations. That's wonderful
Thank you.
news.
Very
So,
nice.
yep. Glad to be alive.
We're glad. We're very glad you're alive. So do you have an opinion about these audiophile releases, or does it not matter to you?
It's not. I guess it doesn't matter. What I like about Pet Sounds as a whole, regardless of what particular version I'm listening to, is really just. It's always been for me about how the music, how I feel when I'm listening to it. I really, when Brian died last year, I found myself almost immediately. I think the same day I had the David Leaf's the first box set, the first Pet Sound Sessions box set. It came out in '97, right. And listening to that, and listening to, because what I found myself wanting when I learned Brian passed on June 11th of last year was I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to hear him working with people, and hearing a young Brian, somebody in his young 20s, and just going back to that and listening. And it's funny because I'm getting a little off track, but this is about Pet Sounds. I was listening to the sessions, and I listened to the tracks, him working with the LA musicians. I listened to the vocals only, and it was like for the first time ever that I thought to myself that maybe in the song God Only Knows, the you in God Only Knows is the music. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you. So just in that moment a year ago, I started thinking about that song in that context of, I wonder if the you was the music.
Wow. Have you asked anybody who might know?
I don't. Well, I think that's kind of a subjective perspective on my part, that it could be applied in that sense because his love language was music. So I think that for Brian, there might be some truth to it, but I think, gosh, that's kind of deep. And I don't know that. I mean, if you were to ask Marilyn, I would imagine that she would think it's just kind of solely from the premise of a relationship song that Brian wrote with her in mind, which would be completely understandable. And, the way that, but I like that, to answer your question about Pet Sounds and these different variations that they do. I like that they do their best to make them interesting. I like the gatefold. You showed that image of the gatefold with somebody created that new artwork, with their heads and the animals and everything. I kind of thought that was interesting to look at. It didn't want me to listen to that record more though. The autographed one I've got framed, that's a mono. So that tends to be the one, if I'm listening to vinyl, even it's an original mono, it doesn't skip yet. So as long as I can take that version out and listen to that, it's my preference, not because, I mean, the remix done in the 90s by Mark Lynette with Brian supervising, where he did the stereo version. Right. I mean, I think that's interesting to hear that, knowing that Brian kind of oversaw the project and was involved. But with Brian and Pet Sounds, I'll tell you my favorite outside of the regular album moment is when this was in the 90s at some point, and there's footage of it on YouTube. I can't recall what it's originally from. But George Martin is at Brian's house, and they're sitting next to each other, and I'm pretty sure it's God Only Knows. And George Martin he's at a board, and he's mixing it and moving the things around. And Brian's just got this like look of wonderment on his face as he's looking at George and
No
listening
pun
to what
intended.
George. No. And he's just looking at George and just he's so enamored with what George is doing to his track and his song, and he's just like, wow, I've never heard it like that before. Just what you just did is amazing type of reaction. And I love that. I love that someone like George Martin, who's so impressed by Brian Wilson, can comment and sit next to Brian Wilson and impress Brian Wilson. I think this just speaks to the power of the music and those amazing, because this doesn't get, I mean, I think people all the time talk about what a great songwriter, producer, and arranger Brian was. But I think when we talk about him that way, we just think of him from the Beach Boys idiom. And it's not necessarily when we mention him in the same breath as these other roles. So when we say Brian, the producer, that we think of him in the same level as George Martin. And George Martin would probably be one of the first people to tell you that he's absolutely on my level. So I think and I think Paul McCartney would agree with that statement. So, you know, that's pretty rarefied air when you think about it, because George Martin was, for my money, the quill of all the music that came out of, you know, from the Beatles and everything. He made them sound so great. But Brian did it all for the Beach Boys from the production role.
Right.
And I think the other thing about Brian, since we're talking about Pet Sounds and everything, is one of the things that I don't hear spoken of a lot is Brian's emotional intelligence. Because I mean, to be 23, 24 years old and to be that emotionally intelligent, that everybody talks about how he heard things and could communicate to the musicians and they could carry out his wishes. And the same was true with the Beach Boys when they would come back from touring, and he'd plug them in and they'd work really, really hard to adapt to what he was doing. But you have to be really emotionally intelligent to even have an idea about conveying what you're feeling and to have it transposed and put into recorded form. So I think there's a lot of Brian Wilson's emotional intelligence that just isn't even discussed. And I think it was so deep that we don't even know where to begin or to end with it, because I just think it's something that I don't know that it's gone unnoticed, because if you listen to Pet Sounds, you hear it, or the Second Side of Today, or little bits and pieces through their catalog, like Lonely Sea, which I think is kind of the precursor to Till I Die. But there's a great emotional intelligence there that Brian had, that when I think of him, I really it's my tendency to think about that as well, and helps me appreciate him all that much more.
Well, you know, you're right in that people do recognize it when they hear it. It may not have ever been articulated, though, the way you just did, and I think that's very insightful, because and you know, that brings up a whole kettle of fish, one of which is that intelligence tests are really lacking. They measure one or two kinds of intelligence, but they don't measure creativity, really. They don't measure emotional intelligence really in any way, even tangentially. They don't. Yeah. They're much more in the realm of logic and knowledge. And there are people out there who wouldn't score very well on a conventional IQ test, but as far as something like creativity and emotional intelligence goes, they're way ahead of a lot of people who would score high on those. And Brian would score very, very high on any kind of test that measured emotional intelligence, if indeed that can even be measured. But it's very obvious that he has a lot of it. So you're quite right.
Yeah, he was so far ahead of everybody. And the thing was, nobody knew. He didn't know. I often refer to Brian as an accidental tourist in the music industry. Like, he didn't know what he was doing, but he was so damn good at it. It was just kind of like, look what Brian just did. Well,
he's very much a savant.
Yes, and it was kind of like what I do.
Most savants have no idea what they're doing, but they're very good at doing it.
That's right. And he was, God, man, isn't it? I was just saying this the other day to somebody. Isn't it incredible that we got to live in his lifetime?
Hey, listen, with everything going on in the world and people talk about what generation had it best or this or that, when it comes down to when I talk about, my lifetime and the greats that we've been around just in the last 50 years, 60 years that we got to be here during this time in the whole history of the world. We're pretty damn lucky to around at this time.
We really are. We still got McCartney. I don't know if you've heard the Boys from Dungeon Lane, but I'm digging that.
Yes, I have.
I got it.
Really digging it. Ripples in the Pond, loving it. I love the whole thing.
I mean, it's definitely one of the best albums he's done in a while. And you got to keep in mind the man is 84 years old, and he doesn't sound the way he's not supposed to sound the way he did when he put out Ram. It's just not, that's not realistic to expect that. And if you take the album for what it is, he's done a really fine piece of work.
Incredible job. The whole vocal thing is something that I don't know how long ago I accepted it with all the artists that I enjoy listening to. I sing in a church choir. If I sound as good as I do 10 years ago, I don't know. I'm a first tenor. I doubt that I'll sound as good in 5 years. It's just the way that it goes. Mickey Dolenz is doing a pretty good job and Al Jardine they do a pretty good job of sounding kind of in that same range and pocket.
They really have. Yeah, they preserve their voice. Obviously, they didn't abuse themselves the way Brian did. Yeah, why do you think? I want to ask, why do you think? So in the 90s, when Brian was putting out, solo, and even first with the self-titled and then Your Imagination, it was like people were in denial. They were saying he sounds as good as he ever did. And it's like, no, he doesn't. Why would he? After what he's been through, and he's not a young man in rock and roll terms anymore. Mm-hmm. Why do you think people were in such denial about that?
I don't know that they were in denial, David. I think it's more about
the way he always did.
No. I think it's more about what the heart wants.
Yeah.
And when people listen to an artist that they've grown to love, and so I'll use myself as this example with the new McCartney album. When one pass I listened to the whole combination of everything, where I'm listening to the words, I'm listening to the tracks with the words. Second listen, I get a little bit more used to it. Third listen, I know this, the words and the music together. So when I get to the fourth or fifth listen, then it's my tendency to focus a little bit more on the tracks themselves and think, oh my God, this guy's 84 years old and he came up with this. So it's less about whether or not I think they sound the same, and it's more so about the creative expression. It's more about the expression. So if you go to Brian's 1998 Imagination album, Brian's expression on that was kind of under the umbrella of adult contemporary because of Joe Thomas. There's some nice moments on there. I was just listening to South American, which is so odd, but it's fun.
It is fun. I agree.
Yeah, so it's not this. So for me, I don't listen to these artists that I love from the perspective of, do they sound the same? I don't anticipate them sounding the same. So if there's a moment on something new after years have gone by where I get a little bit of that inkling of that vocal premise that they once had, then I really enjoy it, and I really kind of find myself attaching deeper to that particular track. Like on Orange Crate Art that Brian did with Van Dyke Parks, there's a moment on This Town Goes Down at Sunset where Brian sings so lovely that it almost sounds like Carl. And I'm like, oh my God. And it's not that, does Brian sound as good as he did on the last thing I listened to? It's more about being in the moment of what's presented to me then. And so so I don't know if that's how other people listen to music, but I think if we get hung up, for me only, if I get hung up on how somebody sounds when I know they're older, then
McCartney's catching a lot of flack recently that tied into the album for the live performances. The Saturday Night Live performance was pretty bad. I mean, he struggled to get the notes out. And so when people then pick up the new album, that now they're listening to it with this idea in their head that his voice isn't the same. Now they're going to make his voice sound better through technology. It's going to be cleaned up and such, but anybody's voice is going to be different, except for whose voice? Kyle Everett was on the show from 4 out of 5 Doctors. His voice seems to have gotten better. I don't know how that happened here.
4 out of 5 Doctors is an 80s band that was on Nemper Records, a division of CBS.
I assumed he was
he's 71 now, and he sounds as good as he ever did.
Better.
That's great.
But that's the difference, though. McCartney, I mean, he still sounds very good on the album. And, of course, he doesn't sound like McCartney of the 70s or the 80s or whatever. But it's not – he doesn't sound bad and like he's struggling at all. But I think people get the image in his head of what he's been doing live lately and really struggling to sound okay. And then they get that attitude that, well, his voice is shot. And it's like, well, I mean, because I got to be honest, when I listened to the new album the first time, I wasn't crazy about it. I was like, it didn't do anything for me. But it wasn't until I listened to it maybe 3-4 times in, and the point that you made where you started getting into the intricacies of the music and the things he was doing at the age he's doing it, pretty incredible. Yeah, pretty incredible.
Yeah,
and then
really,
you appreciate it from a different angle.
If we keep talking about McCartney, we'll be here for 4 hours. Not that that's the worst thing ever, but let's get back to you and your love for the Beach Boys. Now, what I read in all summer long, you came to the Beach Boys fairly late to the table compared to other experts out there, other authors, and you also came to them not direct, kind of indirectly. Tell us about that.
Well, it all started with this record. Well, it did even before this record. The Jan and Dean TV movie, Dead Man's Curve, is kind of how it started. I'm pretty sure that I had Best of the Beach Boys through either RCA or Columbia Records. You know, when you send out the dime or whatever the hell it was back then, that you would get and Best of the Beach Boys, I'm pretty sure I had that record. And I had listened to it, and I liked those early songs, but I don't ever remember in the late 70s being drawn to them in such a way that I had to learn, I had that, what else is there? That didn't happen. When I saw the Jan and Dean TV movie, that's when it happened, because there's this great scene with Richard Hatch and Bruce Davidson where they have their surfboards and they're ready to go surfing. And this sounds so great on tape. And Dean says, what? And he goes, it sounds so great on tape. And then they cut right to them in the studio doing Jan and Dean's version of Surfin', which back then I had no idea that was a Beach Boys song. All I knew was they're doing them in the studio and they're shooting to a montage of surfers on waves. And it kept going back and forth. And that's where I got bit. And I just went, oh my God, this is just so much fun. And then another scene in that TV movie, they had them on skateboards, like out on a beach, and they were like doing a live show, and they skateboarded down the ramp and they fell into the sand and they got up, and I don't know if they're doing a Little Old Lady from Pasadena or what the song was, but it was just so much fun. And I was 14 or so, and that I was bitten. So I ran down to the local record store, and in the late 70s, early 80s, kids, there was no Google.
Where were you living then?
Charlotte. By that time, I'd moved to Charlotte, and my dad worked for IBM. So I've been moved is what IBM stands for. So we got down to Charlotte. I went to the record store, and in those days, you could go really anywhere to find retail music, and there was a lot of used record stores around the Charlotte area too. So I went down to the main current day retail, and I bought this record, and I was just mesmerized by it because it had Surfin' on it, but it was 3 sides of studio cuts, 4 side with this weird cacophony of I didn't know what it was, and but because of the great booklet inside by Dave Marsh of Cream Magazine, I was really intrigued about understanding Brian's role in Jan and Dean's career. Because at the end of the TV special, Mike Love, Bruce Johnson, and Dick Clark make a cameo. So I was really kind of, this was, driving my interest. And within a couple, 2 to 3 years, Malcolm Leo's The Beach Boys and American Band happened, that documentary. And the way he took the Pet Sounds and Smile scenes, just, I mean, I was ruined at that point, because what Malcolm did with Pet Sounds that no one else has done. He introduced that part of the film using the song Here Today. And everybody else tends to use Wouldn't It Be Nice, or I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, possibly God Only Knows, or Caroline No. It's all these well-known or deep emotive tracks by Brian. Instead, Malcolm uses Here Today, and they go to the album Pet Sounds, and it's bump, bottom, and it just drew me right in. And then they have the footage of Brian with the fire hat on. He's in the studio with the bucket of smoldering wood, and his eyes are rolling around. His pupils are woohoo because he's on LSD. And I'm like, what is happening here? That even drove me further. So I have to show this while I'm talking about Smile. I have to show you this. This is a Smile slick.
Nice.
Signed by Brian. It says right across the top, to David with best wishes, Brian Wilson. Carl's signature is right under there. Then we got Mike and Al and Bruce up in the corner. Again,
see now, David, if you sell that to me, I can claim that I got those autographs. Notice
true.
How I surreptitiously threw in the sell it to me part.
This also says to David. I have many of them.
Not your last name. Just as an aside, my favorite scene in the Jan and Dean movie has nothing to do with the Beach Boys or Jan and Dean directly, but it's when Richard Hatch is trying to get out of going to the army. Well, Jan is trying to get out of going into the army, and he's being interviewed by, I guess he's a desk sergeant, and he's not having any of it, and so Hatch gets all he gets all. Well, I'm trying to remember what the word starts with a P that I can't think of right now, and says, "I'm Jan and Dean," like he's both of them. And then the sergeant says, points to a picture of Elvis. "We got Elvis, boy. He's a lot bigger than you." Southern.
It's so true. Well,
I guess pouty was one of the words I was looking for, but yeah.
So
anyway,
so Jan and Dean are what led me to the Beach Boys, and once after the Malcolm Leo documentary, and then after that, by the late 80s, I went to a record convention. Well, no, so by the mid 80s, by 85, I was going to record conventions in additional to local Charlotte record stores and stuff, and really just focusing on completing my Jan and Dean collection, finding out all the albums that this stuff came from, and trying to learn the history of the Filet of Soul record, because there is a Filet of Soul. If you were a Jan and Dean fan, then you could buy the Liberty Records version of Filet of Soul. Well, that's not Jan and Dean's version of Filet of Soul. I would find out years later that side 4, the cacophony of this, was the abridged version of Filet of Soul. And it took me over 30 years. So I had a really nice, beautiful, this isn't in the book, but I had a beautiful full circle moment, because I finally talked Dean into going into his storage and getting the master of their version of Filet of Soul, and he took it to Brad Rosenberger at Omnivore Recordings, and we got that released in 2017, in the fall of 2017.
Yes, I remember. Brad was a guest of ours a few weeks ago, actually.
Oh, no kidding. He's great. I love him.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of my love of Jan and Dean, is kind of what set me on the path. I would meet Lee Dempsey, my business partner with Endless Summer Quarterly, at a record convention, because by that I was collecting. And this is the late 80s, and I was impatiently standing behind him. By that time, I had Smile fever, and I had to find everything and anything that was connected to that record, because Cabin Essence remains my favorite Beach Boys song to this day. because to me, Cabanescence is listening to an American painting. It's almost like listening to Norman Rockwell.
It is gorgeous. Yeah.
So I was very impatiently waiting behind him. He turned around and we struck up a conversation, and then a short amount of time, it could have been 3 weeks, 1 week, two, I don't remember, but we saw each other at another record convention within a short amount of time. And he said, "Hey, come on out to the car. I want to play something for you." And he had a cassette full of Smile bootleg stuff. And he played several things for me, and he popped out the cassette, he put it in the case, and he handed it to me and said, "That's for you." And man, that's why he's on the dedications page, because I think it says, "Thanks to Lee Dempsey for appeasing my, the Smile addict in me." Because to this day, Smile is the shit for me. I mean,
I had been reading about Smile in the early 80s. One day I went into in 1982, I went into a record store called Renee's All Ears. It was on Melrose Avenue in LA. And lo and behold, they had a stack of Smile bootlegs behind the counter. I'd never seen one. I mean, I never thought I would. So of course my heart almost burst out of my chest. And I said, I asked the guy behind the counter, "How much is that?" Had he said, "Oh, it's not for sale," I literally would have jumped across the counter, knocked him down, grabbed a copy, and run out of the store. Thankfully, he said it was $8, which I had, and I remember taking it home and first hearing "Can't Wait Too Long" blew my mind, which is on that bootleg. Yeah. And that's the bootleg that had the funny liner notes that were written by James Watt. The one where he says, "What a nutty guy," about Brian. I mean, yeah, those were great. But yeah, that was my first exposure to Smile. And then of course, throughout the 80s, more and more bootlegs came out with different configurations and better sound. Because the one from 82, sound was but yeah, I mean, it opened my eyes, of course, to a lot of tracks that I had never heard. But yeah, it was it was a great moment for me too.
And the thing that really helped me during that discovery was Dominic Priori's "Look, Listen, Vibrate, Smile," Dumb Angel Gazette. That was like a significant, like that became, every time I listened, I had that book opened. And actually, I want to go back a little bit, because the thing that I do with Endless Summer Quarterly, which I hope to a degree will happen with the All Summer Long book, is I like doing editions of the magazine that are like book and record. Like if I do an issue about pet sounds, that the idea is that somebody would actually get out the record and listen while they're reading. Because I grew up on book and records. I had some comic book ones, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, or Power Records. They were on Power Records, and there were 45 in the back of the book, and you put the 45 on and you would listen and read, and then it would go ding, and to turn the page. So I really love the concept. So I'm very visual like that. I think that this album is a lot like that because of the notes in it and everything. So I always love whenever an album has great packaging and great notes. Yeah. Because that's really when I want to sit down and just do nothing but listen to the record and read.
I get it.
Yeah, that's great. No, can we get back to how you got into taking over Endless Summer Quarterly?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, Lee and I started it innocently enough. I mean, he was offered to buy the business license from Mick Edgell and Phil Mast, who founded the magazine in San Diego in 1987. And sometime around the summer of 93, they contacted him, and as I understood it, they felt burnt out. The Beach Boys weren't giving them time. I don't know what the story was, but they didn't want to do it anymore. Lee contacted me and said two things. I'm only going to buy the business license if you do it with me, and don't expect anything from the Beach Boys. This does not mean that we are going to have access to them.
Right.
So that was the understanding that we had going in. And I just looked at it as, and I think I write this in the introduction of the book, I just looked at it as a chance to write about Smile. It's just, I mean, that's because that's where my head was. And so I think it wasn't long after Carl passed away that Lee kind of lost the inspirational and motivational energy to, you know, his heart just wasn't in it, because if the touring Beach Boys had broke up, which is basically what happened, Carl passed, Al and Mike went their separate ways. David Marks was back for a brief time, but it just wasn't the same. So for Lee, I think it just kind of he just lost his musical. Now, he didn't lose his interest in the music, but he lost his interest in what was available to the fans in terms of a live performance or anything that might get created as the group went forward in their careers. And I understood that. But I looked at it as, oh, what a great opportunity because by that time we'd been doing it for a handful of 6 years. And I just looked at it as an opportunity to get to know more people and to have them tell me their stories through their memories and their hearts about Dennis and Carl, because that's when Carl died in February of '98. We went around and started talking to a bunch of people, and we did our Carl issue. And I thought it was so amazing. And I had met Carl. I never met Dennis. And it was so interesting to me to talk to people who knew those two brothers far better than I ever did. And to hear their memories, but also with Dennis in particular, I would interview different people. And it was so funny to me because I worked with Sony and John Stebbins on the Pacific Ocean Blue Bamboo re-release, because I did some liner notes in there with John Stebbins for that. And I was doing most of the interviewing. And it was interesting to me talking to everybody about Dennis, and they'd all get to a point in the discussion, not any particular question, but they would just get to a point in the discussion and they would laugh because they'd be thinking about something that they couldn't possibly share because they were thinking about something that Dennis did that, you know, was not for public consumption. Right. But it was interesting to me. And so in those moments, it was really cool that I got to experience that from multiple different people. And that's kind of one of the things that I picked up on and started to pay more attention to, was not just what somebody was saying or how they were saying it, but more so how they were saying it than what they were remembering. So really through their heart, because I tend to find, I found over these 32 years of talking to people that if you can get to the heart of the matter through their heart, like their memories that they're sharing are coming through a really personal and emotional place, you're just going to get really special. You're going to have really special conversations and more meaningful ones, I think, even if you're talking about, whether they're talking about a song or a person or a moment or a lifestyle choice, you name it. It really has been a fascinating journey. So I hope I answered your question, but I took it over.
People, when I read, it's obvious with the questions you ask that you're very passionate. And I got to think that all of your interview subjects appreciated that. And you asked a lot of things that other people wouldn't, which I'm sure they appreciated as well, because they were probably sick of the same, ad nauseum questions. So that very much comes through here.
I'm really glad.
And I got to say, after reading the book, I did not grow up like the two of you as a Beach Boys fanatic. I was in the Beatles camp, but I liked the Beach Boys a lot, and I liked all their hits. But for some reason, I did not get into the albums and the deeper cuts, and like I did with the Beatles, I wanted to know everything about the four guys, And to me, looking at the Beach Boys, and from what I did see, Brian Wilson was the shit. Carl Wilson was pretty good on guitar and had a great vocal. But when it came to Dennis Wilson, anything I saw on TV or things to me, he seemed like he wasn't that good of a drummer. He didn't have that good of a voice. He really wasn't a musician. That was my take on it. right? But what I get from your book and all the questions that you asked and the different answers that you get from a lot of people is that Dennis, had a hard driving, thumping style, but he could play, and Dennis could sing, and he was a lot more than what my perception was. He wasn't the Brian or the Carl as far as the Wilsons were concerned, but he did add quite a lot to it. It was just, I think his look, his style, his personal behavior that made you think that maybe music wasn't his primary thing. He was more interested in having a really good time.
How in the world did Brian and Dennis come from the same parents?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's so unfathomable to me because they were so different. But yet Dennis did have a sensitivity that people didn't know about, except for people who were very close to him. Yeah. You hear a song like "Lady," for example, and it's pretty clear that he had that. And then, of course, Pacific Ocean Blue opened everybody's eyes to, this guy, this guy has a soul. He has a heart. Yeah, he's not just Dennis the Menace who was bedding all these women and everything.
Well, he did do plenty of that, but I think really and this will be in the next book that I'm working on right now, is Steve Kalinich, who is such a truly beautiful human being.
He is. I love Steve.
He managed to touch Dennis in such a way that we have wild Dennis. We have this wanting to live, and Dennis was somebody who always lived he tried all his life to live everything to the fullest that he possibly could. Yeah. But Stevie somehow managed to tap into a side of Dennis that was like a really quieted piece. And then you get Be Still and, on the Friends album, and Little Bird on the Friends album, which Brian did, by the way, is uncredited because Brian did that beautiful middle section. But it's all of a sudden we have this other side of Dennis. And so it's the fact that we get that in a recorded format does tell us that this other side existed all along. Just like Brian Wilson could do an upbeat rocker, but at the same time, he could give us Lonely Sea or In My Room or Surfer Girl. But one of the things that I like to touch on and remind people of, because there are other great authors who have put together Beach Boys books that will just tell you that Brian was suffering the whole time. And I'm sorry, if that were completely 100% accurate, then we would not have Fun. We would not have Surfin' USA. We would not have I Get Around, because that doesn't come from a tortured soul. That comes from a person who's having a good time. So I'm sorry. He did have, there's moments in the book with an interview with Cheryl Pomeroy, Cookie, from Bob and Sherry. She even touches a moment where Brian was sad, and she consoled him. So there were those moments in his life, and there's going to be more of that in the second book when Murray sells the catalog. But he was a happy, joyous soul. You don't get those songs from an incredibly sad person. You just don't. Even on Pet Sounds, which is I think Elvis Costello, I'll misquote him, but it's like happy songs about sadness, I guess, is something he said. But wouldn't it be nice? It's a fun song. Here Today is a fun song. I'm Waiting for the Day is kind of an upbeat, fun, cranker. So Sloop John B. It's not a mistake that Brian was able to deliver happiness to so many people. That's not a mistake. And so when you get to those deep, emotive songs like Surfer Girl, Lonely Sea, In My Room, that's when he's choosing, that's when he's making that's when he's being intentional about what he's doing, where he again, emotional intelligence, where he's making the decision that he's going to share a layer of who he is with the buying public, and let them discern for themselves who he is exactly, because he was never an extrovert in the way that he wanted people to know who he was. He was more about sharing himself through his music, and letting people figure it out. And not like, I'll see if they can figure it out. He wasn't like that. He was just so giving in his gift. I mean, that's why I say, isn't it great that we got to live in his lifetime? Because
Yes.
very, very few artists were as open and he was more carefree in the beginning, because he was so he was such an incredible output. I mean, 12 albums in 4 years, and that's just the Beach Boys. But he did Jan and Dean records. He worked with Paul Peterson. He worked with Glenn Campbell. He worked with, Bob and Sherry, Sharon Marie, on and on. The outside work that and the Honeys, all this outside work he was doing, in addition to 12 albums in 4 years. It's an absurd rate of creativity.
I never thought Brian was sad in particular either. To me, it was just overworked. I mean, he had a nervous breakdown. On the plane, as we all know,
right.
Just from doing everything and doing it at a pace, Capitol saying more product. And
Yes.
Along with that, he's playing live with the band and, and wearing every hat, as you say. To me, I mean, what I think people mistake for sadness is Brian taps into introversion. Introversion does not necessarily mean sadness. You can be an introvert and be very, very happy and just be, you can be secure in your solitude.
Yes.
But I think the one thing that Pet Sounds always did for me, I'm also an introvert. It tapped into that. The feelings that you have, the feelings you might have when you're alone about a girl, unrequited love. While unrequited love has a sad component, it also has when you're absorbing it, it makes you know who you are, and that makes you happy. And Brian tapped into that, for me anyway. I didn't see him as being sad, really, ever.
I think you're hitting the emotional head right on the nail. I mean, the nail on the head.
Either way.
Either way. But that's it exactly. That he had this, and keeping in mind, he didn't realize that because of all this work, this ancillary work that he did outside the group, they weren't all hit records. So that's why so many people just don't know about them. He was doing so much interesting work that when something did hit, would become a hit record, typically for the Beach Boys. Then what would happen was then they just attached Brian to that. But all the work that he did, he paid his dues. We just think, the Beach Boys, they didn't work nearly as hard as the Beatles, because the Beatles, as we know, worked very hard.
Yeah.
Because they had to play clubs like in Hamburg,
maybe live, right?
Well, okay. Yeah. So, but Brian put in time as much as anybody in the industry ever. I mean, he put in so much time. That's why he didn't want to tour. That's really that was the crux of it. He wanted to stay home because he just wanted to create. He wanted to spend all his time thinking about creation, because ideas were coming out of him just like a word would, just like a sentence. He was just so on fire. And the great thing about the Beach, two wonderful things about that whole period and the Beach Boys as a whole, was when. So there's no getting around. The Beach Boys were so incredibly lucky to have Brian Wilson. There's no getting around it. But I think equally, he was lucky to have them, because where else are you going to get that blend? Where else?
And that dovetails very nicely with the question I was going to ask, because as you know, and as any Beach Boys fan knows, there's still two camps: the I Love Brian camp and the Mike Love camp. And they're always at odds with each other. People who love Brian, have complete antipathy towards Mike Love. Not everybody, for sure. So I don't want to.
Not me.
Not you, obviously, and not me either. Although based upon what I've read, which of course is not the whole story, it's not hard to he's not hard to dislike. But on the other hand, and we'll get into that too, your impressions. But Brian was very lucky to have Mike Love in a lot of respects, but in one major respect, because as a live entity, there is nobody in that band who could have been a front man except for Mike Love. Nobody. Brian certainly couldn't have done it. Carl didn't have the personality, although he did, obviously, in the 70s. Some of that did emerge, and he did play a role. Dennis, as sexy and as much as girls loved him, he didn't have the spontaneity of articulation to be a front man. No way could he have done that. He was much better in the back, pounding on the drums, taking his shirt off, letting the girls scream for him. But as a front man, no. Only Mike Love could do it. Mike Love was very self-centered, which is not a put down. It's something you need to be a front man. He was very spontaneously articulate. He obviously enjoyed doing it because he didn't play an instrument. He had the freedom to move around the stage, and get animated and everything. Mike Love is the reason why the Beach Boys were as powerful a live entity as they have been for all those years, and he still is. And but there are people, even if they acknowledge that, they'll say, but he's still an asshole. Now, you don't feel that way, and a lot of people who know him don't feel that way. What are your impressions, and what would you like people to know, especially Brian Wilson fans, about Mike Love that they may not realize?
There's two things in the Beach Boys world that I kind of use as my moral compass. One is, what would Carl do? So when he was still alive, I saw that Carl was involved in John Stamos's recording of Forever. That told me all I needed to know. If Carl was involved, he believed in what he was doing. He wouldn't do it if he didn't believe in it. And if you want proof of that, then look at the Beach Boys Wipeout recording video with the Fat Boys. Is Carl there? No. So they put his face on a beach ball in the video to make up for that. But when I saw that Carl wasn't in the video, that's all I needed to know. So when we get to in November of 2015, I don't recall the venue, but I was in the catering room. I was sitting with Al. And I remember Darian was in the room. I don't recall who else, but Marianne was in Al's wife, Marianne. There was a handful of musicians. Brian was not in the room. But I said to Al, hey, listen, it's November 2015. And I'm just talking to him as a fan. I said, I'd really love for you guys to all get together because I really enjoyed the 2012 reunion tour. So I was like, maybe you guys could get together and do a one-off if you can't tour together, like get together and do Pet Sounds in its entirety with all of you and film it for a special and have it on some streaming platform or somewhere. And Al goes, did everybody hear that? And then he repeats what I said to everybody in the room. And then unsolicited, I didn't ask, Al just keeps talking. And Al says, Brian wants Mike on stage. And that told me all I needed to know. So again, it doesn't matter. It really genuinely doesn't matter, good or bad, if Brian and Mike just say lovely things about each other or don't say lovely things about each other. You're hard pressed to find in any interview where Mike Love has ever said anything derogatory about his cousin. He might say, if you're talking about Smile or something, he might have something to say about Brian's choices in terms of getting into drug use, because look what happened to Brian. So from Mike's perspective, it's a very sad topic for him because he wished that his cousin hadn't made those choices. And Brian would tell you, and it also in the book, you should, I shouldn't have done drugs. So it's, and here's another example. If it had been in 1995, I was just thinking about this today. During the Andy Paley, Brian Wilson sessions, Carl Wilson comes in and decides Soul Searching and She's Still a Mystery are okay. We will record those songs. but for whatever reason, Carl didn't want to do any of the other material. Now, I've heard all the material, and I think there's a handful of songs they should have done, but Carl didn't think so. If that had been Mike Love, who had come in and said, we're not going to do we'll do these 2 songs, but we're not doing the others. To this day, they'd be talking about that, and Mike would be another chapter in the Mike Love is a villain and an asshole conversation, because it would have been Mike instead of Carl. But because it was Carl, every time I have this conversation with somebody, we all kind of ponder it. We don't cast any dispersions on Carl. We ponder it and think, I wonder why Carl wasn't supportive of the material, because there's anybody who's heard the material would think there's some really good stuff there. So that it's weird in that respect, because I don't know what happened along the way. I do know what happened at the 1988 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Everybody has seen that. It kind of sticks to Mike S like a fly sticks to paper. But they had him back when his book came out in 2016. They welcomed him back with open arms, and he did a book tour, and he appeared at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it went very well. So I just think, and I won't say I guess it's fair to say I'm biased to a degree, but I'm biased in favor of all of them. I'm in favor of all of them. I'm not against any of them. I've never had any one of them do anything malicious or mean-spirited or anything to me. I've not ever witnessed firsthand them doing anything mean-spirited or malicious to anyone. So I don't have these experiences that other people have where they say Mike Love's an asshole or whatever the thing is. I've seen articles or interviews with like where somebody else, I haven't watched it, it's on YouTube. Somebody said like and it's gotten over 400,000 views of Brian Wilson saying he doesn't like Mike Love or something. And I'm thinking that is just so bad for the band's legacy. And I know Brian, I've interviewed Brian enough times that I know if you ask him a yes or no question, or if you lead him with a question, that is such an easy way for him to bite. So if you ask him yes or no, he's going to say yes or no. If I had ever said to Brian, it's my understanding that you just don't like your cousin Mike. That's a lead.
Right.
That's setting Brian up to say, yeah, I don't like it. Now I've seen interviews with Brian where he says, where he's called Mike an egotist or something to that effect. And that's fair, David, to your point. You almost have to be somewhat of a really confident individual to know that every time you take the stage, that everybody's going to be looking to you to kind of keep the show moving. And to your point, Carl Wilson was a master at keeping the show musically moving, because all the musicians in that band told me they used to follow his elbow. Like the ones behind him, they would say they just follow his elbow when he strummed. That's everybody from the drummer to the keyboardist, you name it. Anybody in the backup band, they followed his elbow. And if you messed up, you got the stink eye. Like he'd turn around, and nobody wanted the stink eye from Carl. But if he turned around at you, you're like, you're off a note, that type of thing. And that was funny. But again, if that story was a Mike Love story, does that make Mike an asshole? And so I get it for people if they've had bad experiences or Mike mistreated them, but I'm on the opposite end of that. I mean, I have one son. He's 24 now. His name's Ethan. He's a young man with Down syndrome. He's high functioning. And when I took him to his first Beach Boy show, Stamos was there. It's July of 2014 in Augusta, Georgia. And they treated Ethan like a prince. I mean, they just like rolled out the carpet for him, brought him on stage for Barbara Ann. And they did not have to do that. Just being nice to him would have been enough. But to bring him on stage and to treat him the way that they did. And I suppose it's true that they did that for me. But again, doesn't that speak to the quality of the people that they are? That they would. Well,
that's what I was going to say. You said you're biased, but your bias is an informed bias. Yes. A lot of people who are against Mike Love are against him because of stuff they've read, which
Well,
could,
and that's
which
usually,
again could be hearsay.
right. It's usually third-party account stuff. So
Right.
when I started doing Endless Summer Quarterly back in the day, I only had other books that I had read, and those other books that I had read were often interviews with people who had an understanding of something that actually occurred from somebody who was there. And so that's like third party. That's not even in the, in the moment. So like Mike gets a bad rap because he came in and like I got a great interview with Danny Hutton that I just did last year. And I'm talking to Danny about Darlin, and how the boys came back and Mike was like, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, Danny, you do know that Mike co-wrote that with Brian, right? And he said, no, I didn't know that. I said, yeah, because it was originally called Thinking About You, Baby for Sharon Marie. Danny said,
Right.
what? Oh my God. He said, if that had been me, I would have had steam coming out of my head. So again, it doesn't make Mike an asshole. What it does show us that was in that moment of time, Mike was being very protective, and you have to, Mike, it is such a sad story because the reality is all of this stems from Mike and Brian both being screwed over by Brian's father, Murray. Okay. And I'm not disparaging Murray to just that one thing, because Murray got him the contract with Capitol Records. Murray did a lot of things for them. So I'm not just trying to say Murray was a bad guy. But what I am saying from an informed perspective is that Murray would not put Mike's name on the writing credits of those early songs. And the only quandary I have, because Mike has told me a number of times, not just me, but many people in interviews, that he kept saying to Brian, talk to your dad. We need to get this fixed. Well, at the time Murray was managing them, why didn't Mike just go to Murray and say, what's up? And this needs to be fixed. So that's a quandary to me as to why that never happened. But
He
it's
may have been intimidated by Murray.
and I'm sure, or maybe even Mike's parents were, because his mother was Murray's sister, that maybe she was telling him, don't you do that.
That's possible. Yeah.
So there's we don't know, but that's a quandary to me. But so then they fire him in '64 during the all summer long recording sessions to say, listen, we're done with you. And again, not thinking about the business side of things. They have no idea. Oh, my dad and my uncle are going to fuck me over, down the line here because he's jealous of us. And he's just pissed off now because we fired him. And we're going to leave him controlling our music. No, bad idea. They weren't privy enough. And so when Murray does sell the catalog in late 60s, it destroys Brian and it destroys Mike. And no one really ever talks about what it did to Mike.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about what it did to Brian. And we know it devastated Brian, but it devastated Mike too, because his name had not been restored to the credits. So at one of my book signings in New Jersey, one of the people who came for the book actually asked me about the lawsuit in the 90s between Brian and Mike. And I just thought, oh, okay, I guess we're talking about this. And one thing I said is you can actually go online and read the court documents. You can find it. And the other thing was, and I believe this from Mike's book, I believe this because Brian has publicly said this as well. Mike contacted Brian after Brian won his lawsuit to restore the property of all the music back to him from Sea of Tunes. And Brian regained possession of it. It was at that time that Mike approached Brian and said, hey, now's the opportunity to get my name restored.
Yeah.
And Brian was on board with it, but Brian was advised by his camp or his team not to do so. So that's why it went to court. Mike never at any time, and this is one of the great, I don't know if myth is the right word. This is one of the great misconceptions about the relationship between Brian and Mike in that band. At no time ever in their history were Brian and Mike truly angry at each other in a mean-spirited way. There was never a time while the two of them were alive that they did not love one another. There was another book signing I did. I think it was, and the young girl said, this young girl in the back said, talk about the relationship between Mike and Brian. And I said, okay, by a show of hands, who here has a sibling or a cousin or a family member that they've been pissed off at? And I raised my hand, and just about everybody out in the audience raised their hand. I said, this is all you need to know. It's because they're musicians and they're a popular band that we know more than we probably ought to. So we've all had issues with family members, but if I say, oh, my brother's a dick or my cousin's a dick, which isn't applicable, it isn't. But if I were to say that, at no point in my heart am I not loving that member of my family, right? That's still there. And I'm glad we're talking about this because I think a lot of people might think it's boring. I don't think it's boring. I don't think love is a boring thing. I think it's a powerful thing.
Mike or otherwise, yeah. That's the joke.
There you go. But John Stamos writes that in the foreword, which I thought he perfectly nailed, that this book is a love letter from me to the band. It is.
And that brings me to another question. John Stamos is another guy who probably gets a bad rap by a lot of fans. And I have to admit, when I first saw the guy on General Hospital, I hated him, but not for a good reason. I was jealous. I was jealous of the fact that his body was about 5 inches wide and his smile was about 40 inches wide, So over the years, I carried that with me, and I've never met him, but I have to say, I've heard most of the things I've heard about him say he's a really good guy.
He is a good human being. He is. Now, as far as his career goes, I've not seen him in too many things myself. I've watched Full House with my son. I've watched Fuller House with my son. I watched a little bit of the Big Shot show where he was like a basketball coach with the girls team. And I watched that with my son because what John has done for Ethan on his birthday is he'll either do a Zoom with him or he'll send him a video. And in 2020, they were filming Big Shot. So John had this crazy contraption over his face, plastic shield and stuff, because they were, 6 feet apart or whatever. And he came over to send Ethan a video. So he threw open the plastic mask and said, hey, Ethan, I'm on the set of Big Shot. Maybe you can come down and play some ball with us. But he's like that. He's caring. I've experienced it firsthand. He's attentive. So like to do the forward, we emailed a couple times. He had some questions. I asked him, will you be at Brian's service and memorial luncheon? And he said, yes. I said, well, I'll be there. Why don't we see if we can carve a few minutes out at the luncheon once we get away from the church? Because I wasn't going to do any. When you're in a church, it's sacred ground to me, sacred stuff. So when we got over to the luncheon, we just stood and talked for 2 to 3 minutes, and I explained further about the book, any questions he had in that moment, and I answered them, and he said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I just thought he really hit the nail on the head, and because to your point, how he gets a bad rap, I think a lot of how he gets a bad rap is because he appears with Mike. So I think a lot of the perspective is, oh, he's Mike's guy, but John is as much an Uber Beach Boy fan as you and I are, and right. Just because he's in in that spotlight as a celebrity, he uses that to help them, and that's all he's ever done. Now, granted, they helped him in return by doing the Forever recording. Right. But that's just been a very like-minded collaboration. Again, if I look back at the Forever collaboration and Carl was not involved, that would tell me something. But because Carl loved John and supported that endeavor, that's all I need to know about John. And he's genuine. I don't know him to be anything other than genuine. I don't know him any other way. I've felt bad for him a few times because when he walks into a backstage atmosphere, he's got to be on. But my experiences with him are he's just And I don't care if it sounds biased because he treats my son so incredibly well. But when I asked him to write the foreword, I did have a hesitation when I thought to ask him, because when I looked at the books that I have in my collection and the forewords written in those books, and his book, for example, he had Jamie Lee Curtis write it. And I don't know what his relationship is with her, but I gleaned enough from reading what she wrote about him that, they know each other pretty well.
Right.
So my hesitation was, John knows my son better than he knows me. So I was kind of like, well, is this going to be a good fit? Because you really need somebody who writes the foreword about you to really know you. So when he wrote the foreword and sent it to me in an email and I read it, my jaw dropped, because he does get it. He does know me, because he's gotten Endless Summer Quarterly for years. He knows exactly who I am. He knows exactly what I am about. And so when he wrote that I know the way, that I don't pick things apart, that I build it up and I hold it to the light, all that stuff is 100% true. And I'm glad that he was able to dial into my truth.
Hey, Tyler writes
my opinion of Love and Mercy. All right.
No, probably the other.
Oh, that's David.
Yeah.
I forgot that you're a David, but I'll offer mine too after you offer yours.
Okay. I thought Love and Mercy, I think that film is, I guess the word, if one single word, is a masterwork. I thought Bill Pohlad did an incredible job of capturing Brian in the 1960s and giving us kind of a sense of what it might have been like, because Bill took the time to listen to the Pet Sounds box set sessions. He worked with Darian very closely to understand Darian's sensibilities, of Darian's perspective of who Brian was as a recording artist. And they really managed in a great way to bring that all into focus in that film, I thought. And to see my buddy Gary Griffin as Al DeLore in the film was like
that's right.
A good kick. I mean, I just got and everybody, like Jim LaSpeza's in that. There's so many. Teresa's as Carol. Yeah, man, it's so cool. It was so cool. So yeah, that was a great kick to see people that I knew in the film. But I just thought Bill really did a great job of kind of registering, visually communicating to the viewer of the film what it might have been like when Paul, as Brian, is holding his headphones and he starts to cry.
Yeah.
Oh man, just like that moment. And I'll tell you, I had an interesting. I was one of the few times I was on the tour bus with the Beach Boys with Mike, and we were sitting at the very back of the bus after a show, traveling for about 2.5 hours. And we got talking about the Love and Mercy film. Mike had not seen it, and I didn't get the sense that he was planning on it. But he said to me, "What'd you think?" And I told him, I said, "Mike, it doesn't." My takeaway after I watched that film, and I say this particularly to the 1960s scenes, is I felt great empathy for the band. Great empathy. Because, again, Brian was so... It's okay to cuss, right?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Brian was so fucking red hot. He was so on that they come back from touring. They had no idea. That they were going to walk into the studio and hear the tracks that would become Pet Sounds. That no one knew the leap forward. No one understood it. You listen to the great interview where they're on tour in Japan for the first time in January 1966. They finish up Sloop John B right before they go. So Brian sends with them I guess an acetate of that song, and they're doing press with the Japanese press, and they're in the room and they put the record on, and for the first time, all of them, the Japanese press and the Beach Boys, are hearing Sloop John B for the first time, and their jaws drop because they had no idea that Brian dropped the track out, and they're like, "Holy shit! How did he do this?" And Al Jardine's mind must have been exploding, because he brought this simple little Kingston Trio track into the group, you know, and Brian just took it and made it this incredible audio universe. Like and that's what Brian did. And I think that's what, when you watch Love and Mercy, you get to witness that. Now there is a moment where Johnny Sneed, who's a great guy, he comes out as Hal Blaine and he's talking to Brian in the alleyway or something. He says, man, what we think you're doing is incredible. And they have the scene where the actor playing Mike has this little moment with Brian about questioning the music or the lyrics or whatever it is. But that doesn't make Mike an asshole, because what people aren't understanding in those moments, this wasn't cousins fighting with each other. This was Mike really asking for clarity and trying to kind of adapt and keep up with his cousin, who again was so fucking hot. He was so far ahead of everybody else in the industry that nobody had any understanding of what was going on, including the Beach Boys, because they didn't. How do you know? You know, Gary Griffin, and you guys can relate to this. Gary Griffin related to me this great story. They said in 1965, Dave, every day I woke up, I would turn on the AM radio, and whatever I would hear coming out of the radio on one day, the next day it would be even that much better. Every day you turn on the radio is better than the day before. So here we are in 66, and Brian is just ahead of all of that, all of it. And nobody understood, including Brian, that he was that far ahead of the game. He was just doing what he inherently felt that was coming to him. That emotional intelligence. He just was doing what was coming. So for Mike to question, this goes back to the childhood. When the three of them would leave their Methodist church and walk home at night, Maureen Love, Mike, and Brian, and we'd be doing 3-part harmony with the Everly Brothers. They were always giving each other shit. They were always questioning each other. That's what siblings or cousins do when you're in family. You just do that. So it's.
I was going to say you know, obviously none of what happened back then would have happened these days with the internet and, you know, other means of communication. When the Beach Boys came home and they saw what Brian had done, and here's where I feel sorry for Mike Love, because, you know, his cousin, the guy who he felt, you know, kind of on equal terms with, is basically saying to him and the other guys, I've left you really far behind. You don't measure up to what I'm doing. This is my work. You're lucky to even be on it. That's kind of how I felt. See, yeah, Brian, and I don't think Brian meant any harm, but he didn't have the best social skills, obviously. I don't think he realized some of the things he was saying, the impact that some of the things he was saying had on the guys. I think he was just stating what in his mind was a fact, that I've moved well beyond you. And, you know, I can understand why my Mike is particularly might have resented him over that.
I'm not aware of any discussions where Brian told them that he had moved on from them and they weren't equal to the task.
I think that was conveyed in it. I'm trying to remember which movie. I don't know if, and again, I don't know if it was American Family. The movie where he tells Dennis, "You're a clubber." In other words,
then again, those are films, though, David.
I know. It was a feeling that I got. It may not be true. You're right.
Well, I think you just have to listen to the Pet Sound sessions.
Yeah,
just listen to those sessions, and Brian would have used his brothers and his cousin, and Carl was the only one that really ended up on those tracks because he'd played straight into the board and play. But Brian wanted to keep the ideas going, so they would be touring, and he would just bring the LA musicians in because that suited his schedule. It didn't make sense to wait for the guys when they're going to get back. I just want to put them to vocal work. They're going to work for me vocally, because I know they can do it. He wouldn't.
Do you think they saw it that way, though?
I think, to your point about Mike, is that Mike, because Mike was the oldest, he was a year older than Brian, and when they started, it was the two of them writing so much material together. Mike on a lot of lead vocals. So when Brian does Pet Sounds, he's using out of the blue, here's this guy who writes jingles for Mattel. Now, Mike, as a lyricist for songwriting, probably went, what?
Yeah.
He does what? So how could he be qualified to do this? And
Right.
really the only qualification was, are you in a relationship? Can we talk about relationships?
Right.
And that was the qualification. And
Right.
and so that's in my book, that's one of the most beautiful things. And the Tony Asher interview never ended up in ESQ. And I'm so glad that I got that in this book, because
Right.
it's astonishing to me, because the fan base, and to a great degree, rightly so, is just kind of focused only on Brian. So for me to ask Tony Asher in May of 2005, you wrote most of the words to the Pet Sounds material. You were having conversations with Brian about relationships. Everybody thinks that when they listen to Pet Sounds, they know who Brian Wilson is. Is it fair to say they would know who you are?
Yeah.
This is 2005. And Tony goes, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I'm like, what? How?
Isn't it
How is
great
that
when you
possible?
get that? Isn't it great though, as an
Yes.
interviewer, when you get that, where people
Yeah.
say, "Wow, no one's asked me about that."
Yeah.
Well, but it's great in that sense, but it's greater in the bigger picture of life and what really matters. Really, again, getting to the heart of the discussion about something and understanding all the different perspectives and putting the perspectives together. Because if you have 6 people in a room, you have 6 perspectives, and they may not match up per se, but they're all equally important, and they all speak to the creative process.
Yeah. I only interviewed Brian once in 1999 when Your Imagination was out. His publicist, who I'm sure you know, and I'm trying to remember her name, Christine something maybe. She set me up with the interview, and it was at his house. And here I am sitting less than 2 feet from Brian, and I'm having an out-of-body experience because I cannot believe this is happening. There's Brian Wilson, my idol, sitting that close to me. Now, this was during a time where he wasn't really articulating. He was giving 1 or 2 word answers. And after a certain time, the interview had to stop, but we were going to do it on the phone within a week. I forgot how long it was. And so I'm talking to Brian on the phone, and he gave me a quote that I had never seen anywhere else. Maybe you have. Well, I was talking to him about Murray, and he said, I really want to thank my dad for kicking my ass and making me work hard. And I thought, wow, I love this. And I believe it. I actually wrote an article, which you can find on the IPO website, called 3 Reviled Men Who Deserve Their Due. And it was about Murray Wilson, Mike Love, and Eugene Landy. And I prefaced the article by saying, if you want to hate these people for the evil things that they've done, go right ahead. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to show another side. I'm here to say that it wasn't all bad. And, and I pointed out about Murray that even Brian himself said that, despite everything, he wanted to thank his dad for kicking his ass and making him work hard. What if Murray hadn't kicked his ass? Brian may not have delivered all the wonderful things that he had. I'm not saying that should make up for all the abuse that Murray heaped on him. Not at all. I'm just pointing out that there was another side. And the side I pointed out about Mike Love was, again, without Mike Love as a front man, the Beach Boys would never have been the live entity that they were. And they wouldn't have been able to, and I use this phrase, keep the summer alive for all these years. And then Eugene Landy was basically, no matter what he did after the fact, I think we can't deny the fact that Brian probably would have been dead if not for Eugene Landy. He saved his life. He really did. After that, he made his life a living hell, but he saved it. There would have been no life. There would have been no 1988 album. There would have been no Your Imagination. And most importantly for most fans, there would have been no Smile, a resurrection, no tour, no album, no nothing. So whatever you think about Eugene Landy, you have to acknowledge that because of him, He got Brian in shape. He got him to stop doing all that crap. He got him down from 300 and something pounds to a healthy 180, made him exercise. That was essential. That was absolutely essential for Brian to keep on living. Boy, you should have seen the vitriol I got, because nobody wanted to understand that I was just I wasn't saying that this dismisses the bad things they did. I just wanted people to acknowledge the fact that these three men also did a whole lot of good. I got so many people saying, Bash, you're sick. You should go. They should hospitalize you. You're absolutely you're crazy. These people were the devil and blah 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 blah, and and like that. Also, I wanted to add my opinion on Love and Mercy very quickly. I thought Paul Dano did a wonderful job of creating the essence of young Brian. I'm biased also because I've always had a crush on Elizabeth Banks. So I was really glad to see her in the movie. And she did of what we know of Melinda, which in my case is not much. She did a fine job. The only problem I had, and this is not to disparage John Cusack at all, but in general, I have a problem when famous people play other famous people, because there's always going to be too much, especially of the famous person, the actor. There's always going to be too much of that actor in that role. And there was too much John Cusack going on for me. And no, he wasn't John Cusack from
Better Off Dead, or
why am I forgetting the High Fidelity? He wasn't John Cusack from High Fidelity, but there was that aura, and I couldn't escape it. I did not know who Paul Dano was. To me, he was just, he could have done a lot of things before that movie. I'd never seen him. So to me, he was an unknown. And so I wasn't, what was the word? Well, let's just say I wasn't biased by by anything that I might have known about them as an actor. So that's my only. A lot of people certainly lauded John Cusack for his performance, and on an objective level, it was probably great. But I could not escape the fact that I was seeing John Cusack as Brian. That's all. But the movie itself, I'll tell you who else I loved, even though I knew he didn't look like him. I love Paul Giamatti as Eugene Landy. And he didn't have to look like him, because most people watching the movie didn't know what Landy looked like. So he didn't look or sound like him, but I certainly loved his performance.
Well, let me jump over here to some comments that came in during this long discussion, because there's a reason I want to get to
we're all geeking out here.
I know, but our friend Starman said he didn't want to interrupt the flow, but he wanted to say, an insightful, profound, and nuanced discussion of brilliant people and their beautiful music. Can't ask for anything more. Thank you so much. And he followed up with, he appreciates the perspective on Mike. Seems overlooked after Brian moved to other writing partners with Mike, who provoked good vibrations. And I know there's an answer into their final form. Good statement. And then Tyler followed up with, David, you are so passionate about the Beach Boys. He's in awe and envious, and I'm definitely buying the book.
Oh, there you go.
So
Thank you, Tyler.
That leads me into a fact that we need to, again, because this is why we're here, show the cover of the book, and let me get rid of this comment so we can look at the book. It's All Summer Long: Conversations with the Beach Boys from Surfin to Smile by our guest David Beard, with a foreword by John Stamos. And I'm assuming, and I think I've seen it, available at all the normal places, from your Amazon to wherever worldwide books can be found. So all you gotta do, it's available now, is type in All Summer Long David Beard, and you'll be able to purchase a copy of this book. It's really good, and it's I'll let you just follow up there real quick, David, in 1 second. But the book is written in a question and answer type form, where your questions are then answered. It's
interviews, basically.
Answers by various people answering the same question. It's a very interesting book full of that type of writing, and it gives you different perspectives on each question that you ask. So Yeah, it's very well done. It's a very, I call it it's an easy read. It flows really easily, and I read through it in probably a day and a half total, and it's a good read.
It's got a good feel and
pick it up, yeah, all summer long. David Beard.
So the thing that because we've talked about John's forward, so everybody who's a fan of Brian Wilson, well, everybody knows who Wilson Phillips is. Most people know who Carney Wilson is. Her quote on the back of the book tells anybody what they need to know. And if you go to the Amazon site, the quote is somewhat longer. But Carney says, the Beach Boys touched many people's lives. David Beard touched them. That's all you need to know. So if Brian Wilson's daughter feels that way, John Stamos's forward is 2 pages, or not even that. It's like a page and a quarter. And Wendy's got a quote on the back of the book too, where she actually learned something about her dad. That's a big deal to me. That Brian's daughters are like full on board endorsing this book. So it's not just a Stamos endorsed book. This is everybody endorsing this.
And Starman says he was 110% in the day the book was announced, but this conversation is only heightened by longing for a copy.
There's 2 books sold.
And Starman also says he's a New Jersey native, wasn't able to make it either the recent events. Is there a place to purchase signed copies online?
I don't think so, but I would look touch base with Words in Maplewood, New Jersey, and touch base with Bookends in Ridgewood, New Jersey. They're the great group of owners there, and if nothing else, they could always contact or reach out to my publicist, and maybe we could arrange something with those bookstores because I was there, and do something where you could order them to have me personalize them, and maybe we could sort it that way. Because you want to be able to do that through Amazon.
No, not at all.
Now, David, I have a perspective here that I want to run by you, and I don't know if you're going to agree, but I know that Smile is your favorite Beach Boys album. I love it. It's not mine. Sunflower is my favorite album of all time by anybody. Surf's Up is my 3rd favorite album of all time by anybody. So that period, that early 70s period, and Holland is way up there too, is my favorite. But of course, I love Smile, and I love Pet Sounds. But my feeling is, here's the thing. I also love Wild Honey a lot. I thought it was an unbelievable job that these blue-eyed boys from Hawthorne, California, could put out essentially a soul record. And it's among my favorite albums. I'm of the opinion, and I know this is going to raise the eyebrows of a lot of people, I'm glad that Smile didn't come out at the time it was recorded, because had it come out, there would have been no Wild Honey. But what we did get were all these bootlegs, and then ultimately a finished version of Smile with Brian singing and with them touring. So to me, we got the best of both. And also, I don't know that the public would have been ready for Smile. I wonder if the critics would have looked at it and said, this is all fragmented. It's weird. What the hell is Brian doing here? Well, how would that have affected Brian's gentle tortured psyche at that point?
Well,
So he was spared that. What do you wish it had come out?
Well, we'll back up 1 year. When Pet Sounds came out, the same exact thing happened. Pet Sounds was not reviewed as this great, incredible piece of work. And yet here we are all these years later, and it's one of the most celebrated records of all time. I think the same thing would have happened with Smile. That's just my opinion.
Really?
Yes, okay. I do. Because it is so avant-garde, because it is so outside the construct of what a record album should be, which is why, again, I think it got shelved. And Brian speaks to that in the book, and the next book picks up in June of 1967 with Smiley Smile. It picks up right where this book leaves off. And it's Arnie Geller who says in the beginning of the next book, the very fact that Brian just put Smile on the shelf tells everybody all you need to know. But what is weird, to your point, is that Brian had, after Pet Sounds, had released Good Vibrations after 5 months of work. And that goes all the way to the top. So why Brian Wilson didn't just look at Capitol Records and say, shove it up your ass. You're gonna wait for me to do what I'm doing. And when I'm done, I'll give it to you. And then that'll be it. And then we'll move on to the next thing. But you're going to wait because I'm working on something important right now. And that's what he had to do with Pet Sounds. They went and did the party record so he could buy himself more time.
Right.
And I guess they just ran out of ideas to buy themselves more time. But he should have been able to. This is what is another one of those quandaries for me, is why Brian didn't just tell them, you're going to wait because what I'm going to give you is going to be special. But because it was so avant-garde, because what Van Dyke beautifully brought in was this really kind of outrageous literary construct of looking at everything from a kind of under the guise of the Beach Boys, America's band. Okay, we're going to write music and we're going to write about this. We're going to write about the history of Americana. And so this is what's amazing to me. This is what's crazy to me about this whole thing is in the late 1800s, you had so many people migrating west because of the gold rush, right? That was the big thing. Let's move west. We're gonna create a new life for ourselves. We're gonna go out. We're gonna find gold. We're gonna take up root. This is the new frontier. Well, not until 1963, when Surfin' USA hits the airwaves, do all of a sudden all the teenagers have the same idea that our forefathers had in the late 1800s to go out because of the gold rush. Now all these teenagers are hearing these songs with the same idea in mind. And then in 66, you have California Dreamin'. There were other songs, but to me, Surf City, Surfin' USA, both in 63 are kind of where the vivid color opens up the imagination to the point where people wanted to go to California on purpose. Like that was a new thing. Right. And not since the gold rush. So when you get to Smile, here's Brian Wilson writing it with a guy about that. The whole thing, the whole expansion, the taking over of the Hawaiian Islands through American greed, taking away the Indians' property, American greed. So it was really kind of against the grain in terms of the idealism that was being put into place in that music. But it was so. I think it would have aged not quite like Pet Sounds, but maybe even more like an Andy Warhol painting, like something that just like a Norman Rockwell meets Andy Warhol thing, like just so different and colorful and unusual that over time people would be pointing back to it and going, this actually happened in 67. This thing, like Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies, that actually happened in 68.
Right.
Wow. Isn't that great? Isn't that an incredible record? I'm a Moody Blues fan. I could point to almost so many Moody Blues records in that era and go, that happened. Right. There's so much interesting music that came out of that era. And again, had Smile happened, I think it would have been just like Pet Sounds, where from not from the chart success, but from all the musical peers in the industry going, holy shit, look what he did now. Because that's what they were doing. McCartney famously has said, and I'm paraphrasing, that he bought a copy of Pet Sounds for every one of his kids when they graduated high school. And then he's gone on to say that you're not musically educated until you've heard Pet Sounds. Imagine what he would have said if Smile had come out.
I wonder.
It's just because
I really wonder what he would have said. I wonder if Smile would have been just too over the top for people.
I imagine Lennon would have absolutely adored Smile because it was so out there. But that's the strange thing to me, is that Brian didn't really truly understand how important his gift was when he got to the Smile recordings, that it was as important as ever. And when you're ahead of everybody else, it's easy to not realize that you're ahead of everybody else, that even though this is so different, even though this is so unusual, it's going to be okay. Even though if I don't think people are ready for it, I'm still going to put it out there into the world to see if they'll see what they think of it.
Another question coming in. Tyler wants what you think about the other David book, David Leaf.
David Leaf. I've had this. I was pausing because I've thought about discussions that I've had with David Leaf. I think David is an integral figure in Beach Boys lore as it relates to his passion and his desire to tell Brian's story. He kind of started with a fan magazine too, because he started with his Pet Sounds newsletter that he created when he moved out to California initially. And then that transferred into book form with the Beach Boys and the California Myth. What I have difficulty with David's books, because he's done 3 versions of the Beach Boys and the California Myth, the final one being called God Only Knows.
Right.
And then the Smile book. And I enjoy reading them all. And David knows this because we've had the discussion. I feel like his book, the California Myth book, was kind of the Brian Wilson and the 5 Assholes. And I think for that to have occurred in the time that it came out, because the first one came out in like 78 or so, I think that damaged the Beach Boys legacy, because I pointed this out to him, and I pointed it out to many people, when David came into their world, 77, 78, it's not a good time in the group's career. They're doing all that they can to get Brian involved. So much so they do MIU, and Mike gets a little overbearing with that whole thing. Everybody's got to meditate, and everybody comes out to MIU, and they do create music. And there's a couple of really nice.
I actually like that album, not as much as Love You, but I like it.
What Winds of Change is a great track.
I love Pitter Patter. Nobody else does, but I do.
It's okay. But that's okay. That's subjective. That's the beautiful thing about music. Yeah. But so David Leaf comes into their career at a point where they're just trying to figure out how to get Brian involved, and David's there telling them all. I mean, it's famously written. Like, the first Beach Boy he ran into was Dennis Wilson on the sidewalk near Brothers Studio, and he told him why he was there, and Dennis laughed at him and said, "Good luck," because they knew and understood that Brian was in a bad place, and it was doing all they could do to get him to be creative and to do stuff. And David showed up telling them all, "I want to tell the Brian Wilson is a genius story." So the timing couldn't have been worse for David. Yeah, and because of that, it's my perspective that they were not keen to be buddies with him, because he was wanting to tell a story that wasn't accurate to what actually was going on. And so I could see Mike being very defensive with him. And if everybody's kind of like off or put off by his, I want to tell the Brian Wilson's a genius story, then they're not going to be quite so open, and they might be kind of, who is this guy? What is he doing?
Dismissive, yeah.
And so then when David does get to finally releasing the book, it is Brian and the 5 Assholes, because they all treated him like assholes, right? So I mean, that becomes the story. But I really do think it hurt the group, because there's nothing. I'm all for promoting Brian and holding him up, but I think they all deserve that. So at no time do I think anybody deserve. No one should be run over by the bus, by the Brian is a genius bus. Nobody, there's none of them deserve that. And I've heard enough accounts from people who were there to know, as one example, that Carl Wilson was not a fan of the Brian is a genius and we're all just lucky to be here.
I wouldn't imagine Dennis probably didn't mind. He had that quote about, we're his fucking messengers. He's everything, we're nothing.
But messenger is that's a strong statement. That's not saying we're his puppets. Messengers is a whole different ball of emotional cargo. To say we're his messengers, that's saying we know how to adapt to what Brian wants. We know how to carry out what he needs. That to me is a whole different context than saying we're his puppets.
But as I've read the quote, he also said he's everything, we're nothing. But I always took that to him. I took that to him trying to build Brian up.
Well, exactly, because he needed it, because they were all trying to help Brian get back. And then the We Got a Groove box set where the I think it's the third LP where they have the 5 things from Brian's cassette tape, the demos.
Yeah.
And Mike is in the room with him and saying, Brian, that's a motherfucker. Is that going to go on the album? So if Mike's right there, like, let's do, I love that. Let's do that. I mean, that's great. So if, again, we have this third party myth building all these years, and I think it started with David's first California Myth book, that it's Brian and everybody's a nasty person. And we just got the We Got a Groove box set, and there's Mike during the Love You album sessions promoting what Brian was working on. Yeah. So that goes against that.
Well, maybe when he said motherfucker, he meant bad. No, I know he didn't.
No, we didn't know. No. But I love David. David is a dear friend of mine. So but he knows how I feel. So I haven't said anything out of turn.
So one of our guests said, I appreciate your candor. And that was a very honest portrayal. Yeah.
Yeah. And Starman is talking about, I'd love to know what reception Smile would have had at the time, but would Capitol would have issued a 40-something minute single LP? We'd still have missed a lot of what has become integral, you know?
Well, if Smile had been released, Capitol would have released the Best of the Beach Boys Volume 2 right after it, which they did anyway. But it would have been after, right after, like they destroyed Pet Sounds, because Pet Sounds comes out May 16th, 66, and then July 5th. Best of the Beach Boys. It's just like no ability to really see the big picture.
It's funny how people always call Pet Sounds a commercial failure, yet it reached number 10 on the Billboard chart. That's not bad.
A failure. No, it's not a failure.
Pretty, compared to what happened after. That was a huge success.
And again, it reached number 10 on Billboard, as you discussed, in a time period when we had so much great stuff coming out every single day, and every week there was albums that are legendary coming. It's like it's not like today where you've got the Taylor Swift album comes out, and then maybe a month from now Olivia Rodrigo is something that the kids pay attention to. No, back then this great stuff and leaps forward were coming all the time, and it was tough to maintain a long period between.
That's right, Mark. But now when we look back, Pet Sounds is this iconic masterwork.
Yep.
And so who knew? Nobody knew. No one knew.
You know who did know, David? The UK.
They did.
They knew.
And I think Bruce Johnston kind of played a little bit of a part in that, because he went off with the Derek Taylor gave him the 2 mono pressings to take with him in his thing. And I love it how he just had like the equivalent of a little girl's record player in his hotel room at the Waldorf. And McCartney and Lennon were there listening to it, playing cards with a couple of chicks who stopped in. And they're playing cards and they're listening to Pet Sounds. And everybody thinks that the result of them hearing Pet Sounds was Sgt. Pepper, and that's not accurate.
Right.
The first result of what they gleaned from Pet Sounds was Paul with doing Here, There, and Everywhere. That was the first direct result of what they took from that record. And Lennon liked the album, but Lennon's favorite song from the area was The Little Girl I Once Knew. Which
is very interesting because of all the singles that Capitol released, that was the dumbest choice. And not because it's not a great song, it is, but the dead air. How could they not think that was going to be a problem? I mean, could you imagine turning to a radio station, a popular radio station like KHJ, and they're playing Little Girl I Once Knew, and you get to the dead air part, and then you just switch the station? No wonder it didn't do that well, because I think it's a great song, and I certainly I laud Lennon for his taste, but I would have released. I mean, if I had from that period, I probably would have released maybe Let Him Run Wild instead. But Little Girl I Once Knew. It's like, great song, but bad choice for a single.
And speaking of Bruce Johnston, I got not to give away too much in your book because we want people to buy it. But one fact that you brought up in your book, I never knew that Bruce Johnston was a backup player for Richie Valens.
Oh
yeah, I did not know that. I read that 3-4 times. I'm like, wait a minute, but what? And yeah, that was a mind blower right there. Holy cow, I loved it. Starman says, sort of general interest question: can the UK success, the Beach Boys in those years, be chalked up to the exoticism of America, California sensibility rather than just the quality of the
That is a great question.
Wow. That is possibly. I'm not for the UK. I can't speak to that. Those fans really grabbed a hold of that more artistic work, like the Today album, Summer Days, Pet Sounds. They really seem to get it. Whereas the fans here in the US, and I'm only basing this, I was born in 65, so certainly not me, but I'm basing it on the chart position and how things did. It just seemed like their fan base in the US seemed to keep wanting more of what they had already heard. And there's proof in that, because when you get to 74's Endless Summer collection, that goes to the top of the charts, and then they have an incredible successful.
Thank you, American Graffiti.
Yeah,
I think that had to be the impetus, having All Summer Long in the closing credits.
Oh yeah. And then when Harrison Ford's racing the other guy, is it I Get Around that's on the radio?
I don't think so.
When Mackenzie Phillips is in the car with the other guy who's racing Harrison.
Yeah. Well, that was Surfin USA or Surfin Safari.
Okay.
I think it was Surfin Safari, and he turns it off and says, "I don't like that surfing shit." Yeah.
But that was
rock and roll ended when Buddy Holly died. Yeah. But having All Summer Long close that movie was the best thing that ever happened to the Beach Boys.
Well, in the second generation,
it was impetus for Mike Love probably to go to Capitol and say, there's a market for this. There's still a market. Put out a best of. I'll help you.
Well, that's not quite what happened, but
seems like it did.
Well, Mike named the collection because he didn't want them to just call it another best of. But it was Capitol who had picked up on that, and it was all brought together because they were not selling their show. This is all in the second book with my interview with Jim Gershow, because Gershow was the one who changed their trajectory. Because they voted as a group because they weren't selling out venues. So they voted as a group. We need to do something, but we don't know what to do. Who should we talk to? Jim Gershow. Dennis said, I'll go. So Dennis is the one who went up to Caribou, told Jim what was going on, told Jim, Dennis told Jim that we don't know what to do. So Jim said, well, I'll come see a couple of your shows and then see if there's something that I can advise you on. I can't just tell you what to do. So I'll come and see your shows. He saw that they were doing medleys of the car songs and medleys of the surf songs. And it was Jim Gershow who told the band, get rid of the medleys and do the songs in their entirety. It was Jim Gershow. That's where it started. That's where they got back into, in 74, got back into doing oldies. That's where it started, because they were trying to incorporate the songs from Holland and Surf's Up and Sunflower into their, and they were doing that because you get that on the In Concert album from 73.
Right.
But he said, get rid of the medleys. The fans are coming to see you do the songs that they know.
Mm-hmm.
So put all the songs back into your sets. And then Gershow starts playing bass with them. And before you know it, they are highly successful. And in 75, they're touring with Chicago, the other group that Gershow oversaw. So, and then in 74, they record on Wishing You Were Here with Peter Cetera.
Yeah, what a the vocal. Yeah, those vocals are amazing.
So that's a whole moment in time where the stars aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not Mike Love who said we need to be doing oldie songs.
I
No?
I thought I'd read an interview where he kind of took credit for that, but I couldn't.
Well, he'll take credit for the Endless Summer album name.
Right. Oh, just the title. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he went to Capitol and tried to convince them, but I guess I got it wrong. All right. That's easy enough to do.
Yeah, it is.
David, I want to play a couple of songs that are going to appear on this year's International Pop Overthrow compilation, and they're evidence of, not that we need a lot of it, but they're evidence of Brian's legacy continuing to live on. And the first one I want to play is by a local artist named Danette Christine, and it's called Brian Wilson, and it's an ode to him. And the other one is a cover of a not obscure to you, but more obscure Brian Wilson penned song. I'll tell you about that after we're done playing it. Is that okay with you? Can we play these?
Yeah.
All right. So where am I? I got to find them.
In Southern California.
I got them. All right. So let's start out with Danette Christine doing a song that she wrote as in tribute to one of her favorite artists. It's called Brian Wilson, here on Material Issues.
Surf's up, yeah, but what's so great? Oh, the water is terrific. I wait for the perfect wave. Out in the Pacific, drowning, and I never left the sand. Upside downing all my brilliant plans, and I feel just like Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. I'm a genius. I'm just a little misunderstood. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. And the sun's gonna set on another wasted day. All the noise of people try to say absolutely nothing. Crowd the floor where I am not on the edge of happening. Emotions sometimes get out of hand, like the ocean crashing on the sand. I feel just like Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. I'm a genius. I'm just a little misunderstood. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson. And the sun's gonna set on another postcard day. Yeah, there's something strange about finding the perfect voice in your head. And there's something great about finding that orphan song in your bed. So drop the needle on it.
got another one.
The way I act don't seem like me. I'm not on top like I used to be. Well, I give in when I know I should be strong. I still give in even though I know it's wrong. No, it's wrong. I guess I'm dumb, but I don't care. And breaking off wasn't hard to do, but I couldn't stay away from you. I feel love, but not the way I did before. This time around, it's got to be forevermore, evermore. I guess I'm done, but I don't care. And baby, since we've been apart, baby, I found I have a heart. I couldn't let go even if I wanted to. And you must know, baby, now it's only you. I guess I'm done, but I don't care.
That was Grace Crugnali doing Guess I'm Dumb, which, of course, you know, written by Brian, recorded by a pre-famed Glenn Campbell, who, of course, played in as a Beach Boy for a while. Before that, we heard Danette Christine with a song she wrote called Brian Wilson. Different perspectives, different age groups. Danette's been around for a while. She was in a band in the late 80s, early 90s in LA called the Tearjerker. So she's an LA gal, always has been. Grace Crugnali is in her early 20s. She's from New York. That track was produced by her dad, Eric Crugnali. But it's nice to see somebody of her age appreciating a song that came out 60 years ago. I mean, I just want how in general, what do you think about Beach Boys payans? Do you like them a lot?
I can't. Well, that's a general. For me to hear that question it sounds somewhat generalized. I don't want to. I don't want to answer it generalized.
Okay.
I'll respond to what I just heard.
Okay.
And I think that because what I felt the whole time that I was listening, particularly to the first one because it was an original, is it just brought me a lot of joy because I was listening to Brian's legacy living on in others. And isn't that the point of this incredible music? You know, that he has affected people and influenced people of all ages, you know, regardless of when they discover or when they come
and genders.
in.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, it kind of initially when the first one was playing, I almost thought of Zooey Deschanel because, you know, she's got her own interesting history because it was her father who was filming the Fire portion of the Good Vibrations music video.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I read that recently and that kind of stunned me. So that's not the gender thing. is, I mean, because look at the Honeys, that was a different gender. So I just think that, and to a degree, even listening to these two recordings reminded me of the song that Carney and Brian did on the Rob Wasserman Trio project, Fantasy Was Reality. Because anytime I hear something intriguing with a female vocal, I'm just like that. I mean, it's just I like the tambourine hints and the guitar work and the percussion use. It's just, it tells me that they're really from a deep place, really affected by Brian's music. Because it's one thing to recreate something, but to recreate it in such a way that you really feel not necessarily the love, but the true intention behind it. And both of those songs captured that.
Oh, I'm glad you thought so. Mark, put the back cover of the IPO compilation that's coming out that we're going to have in August for people who come to IPO LA. I want you to see something I did here, if you can find it.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking. I'll get it in a second.
Yeah, we need the picture because I can't really do. If I describe it, it won't do it justice.
Yeah, I had only gotten the front cover.
Oh, you didn't get the back. Okay,
yeah, I'll get it 1 second.
I thought. All right. Well, I'll just say it. I started a sequence on the second disc. These are all 3-disc compilations. On the second disc, I started a sequence with Danette Christine's Brian Wilson, and I followed it with Grace Crugnelli's Guess I'm Dumb. And then I followed it with, oh, there we go. You'll see starting with track 4, then there's 5. The Pretty Graves, Do It Again, JD and the Retro Riders, All Summer Long, and the Incurables, When I Grow Up. Those last 3 are originals. I just figured, wow, look at these titles. I have to, I got to do something like that. I got to pay tribute to Brian that way. So tracks 4 to 8 have some relation to Brian Wilson, even if tracks 6 through 8 aren't the Beach Boys songs.
Nice.
I see. Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I love it. And that's going to be that'll be out for IPO LA, right?
Yeah. You must be familiar with this.
It's got a glare on it. I can't quite see
the Surfonics.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Who was it? I don't remember if it was Kingsley Abbott or Chris White himself that sent this to me in around 1993. I mean, I'm a huge Chris White fan, and I got to meet him. He, Sean McCreevy, of course.
Yeah.
Sean McCreevy had a band that played IPO in Liverpool, and he among his originals, he also covered several Beach Boys songs in that set, and he got Chris White to do background vocals, and I was so honored. I was so honored to have him on the stage of the Cavern Club in an event that I had put together. Chris was such a nice man. Did you ever have the occasion to talk with him?
No. I do know how incredibly talented Sean McCreevy is.
Yes.
You're just making me think of something. So I do want to, because you mentioned Kingsley Abbott, I never actually spoken to him, but he's a really generous soul. I do want to mention that we did just lose Peter Riem.
Yes.
And that's a tremendous loss to Beach Boy, to the Beach Boy universe. I mean, Peter was a great soul. He really, I always felt a better and stronger connection to the music whenever he wrote a piece for ESQ. He always wrote from a really informed, practical standpoint, but the way that he wrote was really powerful and lovely at the same time. Like it was easy to kind of dial into his writing, and he's going to be missed. And just while I'm at it, if you'll allow me to be somber for just less than 1 minute,
Sure.
We've lost, in the last few years, we've lost Billy Hinchy, Jeffrey Foskett, Brian, of course, Ed Roach, and Peter, and these I'm still processing Billy. I can't. I'm not even to the point where I can process Jeffrey or Ed, or I saw Ed at Brian's thing last year. This is. I do love that. When it comes to recording artists, or really anybody who's has shared their expression with the world, that we have artifacts that we can continue to enjoy in spite of the fact that they're not here anymore. But so I think that's really unique and special. And one of the things I just truly love about the recorded event, because we can go back to it and it doesn't, right? I mean, because Carl and Dennis have been gone a long time, and we still get to enjoy their the moments that they decided to share with us. So I love that Brian's, it will never end, David. That's the great thing, is Brian's influence on the world will never come to an end. And that's pretty it's stunning. I mean, that's the legacy, and that's the legacy of the Beach Boys, is that there's never going to be a summer where we don't want to hear those songs. Mm-hmm. There's never, it doesn't matter if we're talking about 1,000 years in the future. When it gets to summertime, that's the music that anybody who's heard it wants to hear.
It's going to be endless, I tell you. Oh God, I walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yeah. But it's true. It's true, and that's really because Beatle fans, when Beatle music you can put on any time of the year, right? If you're just in the mood for the Beatles, you just go put that on. But the Beach Boys and their catalog certainly goes well beyond summer themes. But it is a tendency of most fans to want to hear that music when it gets to June, right? I mean, as soon as the summer comes, you want it. You want that joy. You want to be taken and you kind of transported back to that time in your life when you either discovered them for the first time, or if you were fortunate enough to actually grow up when the albums were released. There's an even deeper connection there. So it's astonishing music made by an incredibly group of talented men.
And we are again very lucky to have been on the planet at the same time to be able to enjoy all this too. So
you know what else we're lucky for? Having you as a guest. This has been so much fun.
Okay,
thank you.
It's been fun.
And once again, there's the book, All Summer Long, Conversations with the Beach Boys, From Surfin' to Smile, by our guest, David Beard, forward by John Stamos. It's available kind of anywhere you Google. You can get it from Amazon, from all kinds of places. So
and you answer a question that a lot of us had, which is you're not stopping at Smile. You're going to do another book that covers later periods.
Yeah.
4 more?
No, at least 3 more. So that,
wow.
Because again, it's so that each book is kind of the publisher said to me, we want, and this is just going into book 1. The idea was a couple of books. And they said 90 to 100,000 words. So I already had more, I already had all the way through 2020, because I was envisioning in my mind, the first book would go to the 70s. And then maybe book 2 would pick up with Sunflower, because I got such great interviews with the guys for that record. It just, 190 to 100,000 words. So I'm already 70% done with book 2. It's got stuff in it that I've not read anywhere else, some of which has already appeared in ESQ, some of which has never appeared in ESQ. But there's a whole chapter about Radiant Radish. There's a whole, for Arnie Geller, who was behind putting that together with Brian and Steve Kortoff. Steve's not here anymore, so to have Arnie tell the story and to tell why the store closed and everything else, it's all there. I have a great chapter with Captain and Tennille, Daryl Dragon and Tony Tennille, where they tell about their time. Well, Daryl's is even more extensive. He's in multiple chapters because he worked with Dennis on so many recordings.
Right.
But to have a Captain and Tennille chapter, again, nowhere else. So it's a fascinating. And then the Beachago, the chapter I'm working on right now is the Beachago chapter with interviews with Jim Kershaw. Well, that's Billy Hinchy's claim to fame right there. He came up with that.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it's interviews with Robert Lamb, Jim Gershow, Walt Parazater, and Peter Cetera. About
We lost Walter
Yep.
Parazater. I became friends with his daughter when she came to one of my shows, and I just gotta say she's stunning, absolutely stunning. But he was a very handsome man too.
But this is again, and Mike Love just lost his sister Maureen, and I had done an interview with her back in 2018. So she's in the very first chapter where they're talking about their childhoods. And when I started this first book, Brian was alive. In the summer of 2024 is when I started it. So it becomes more and more powerful and more meaningful to me because it's giving these people who aren't here a living voice, and giving people who aren't here a living voice is really important.
It is.
No, it's great. It's part we talk about all the time about why we do material issues, and a lot of the artists from the 60s and 70s that we've interviewed, we've lost a handful already from our first episode, and we've archived stories from artists that maybe haven't done an interview in 25 years, and it's there for all time. So to put that out and have it have these people in there is really, really a great thing.
And there's the rub, because whether or not you knew these people, the one thing that's always going to stay with us is whatever they contributed, their music. Brian's he's gone, but his music will always be here. And
that's right. That's right.
That's anytime I get sad about losing somebody like him, I think about that, and it makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good on you. Well, congratulations, David, and
thank you.
Best wishes with the book. One more time, take a look at it all summer long. Conversation with the Beach Boys from Surfin' to Smile. David Beard, forward by John Stamos. Go out to Google, say all summer long, David Beard. Where can I purchase it? It'll take you to Amazon. It'll take you all kinds of places. Do yourself a favor and grab a great book right now, because you can take it to the beach or take it to the backyard and enjoy it all summer long. Read a great book. So there you go. David, thank you again for being
so much, David. It was great.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, David. Okay.
Yeah. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
That was fun.
That was fantastic. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. It was really enjoyable. Which I needed that, because halfway through the interview on my Facebook feed, it popped up. It said, you and I have discussed this briefly before, that Paul McCartney has in playing in concert has never done "I Want to Hold Your Hand" since 1964. He has never done it, and he did it yesterday at Taylor Swift's wedding.
Wow.
Yeah. So that pissed me off.
I wonder if she specifically paid him to do it.
Probably. And it pops up my feed. Paul McCartney plays "I Want to Hold Your Hand" for the first time since 1964 at Taylor Swift's wedding. I was like, really? It's bad enough you had your wedding at Madison Square Garden, made a big circus out of the whole friggin' thing. McCartney, number one, he had to be there, and number two, he had to play "I Want to Hold Your Hand." Please, I'm so over this.
Yeah.
So I needed a great interview with David Beard. That was good. That was really good.
It was
stuff.
So we've got a few things coming up. Next week is our first guest list date in quite a while.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely be playing tracks from current albums. A lot of really good stuff has come out since the last time we did this. And hopefully there'll be some form of Stump the Bash or Beat the Bash or something the Bash.
Yeah, let's see what we can do. We'll try to figure something out for next week.
Yeah, those dates are always a lot of fun. And then on the 19th, and again, I always seem to forget to do this, but on the 19th, we have a pretty cool guest, a guy who's...
Yeah.
That's funny. They have a cool guest who's put out a lot of really excellent albums over the years, and he has a brand new one on Wicked Cool called "Haunted by American Dreams." I believe it just came out on Friday, actually.
Yeah.
I don't have my copy yet, but I'm looking forward to it. His name's Ryan Hamilton, and he's had some albums that have done very, very well on my list, and he's been through a lot, a lot of good and bad recently, and it'll be great to have him as our guest on the 19th. And then on the 26th, what do we got?
Well, 26, we got a very good friend of both of ours for a lot of years. He put out a number of albums. One of my favorite being titled "She," and it just happens that album just turned 30 years old. Make me feel old. Oh my god!
Half the age of Pet Sounds.
Half the age of Pet Sounds. But he just released the 30th anniversary edition on a number of different vinyl deluxe sets that you can pick up. But Mr. Willie Wisely is going to be here. Just one of my favorite. Well, I don't. We both said this before. We don't really consider him a power pop guy. He's a little bit more singer songwriter.
He's power pop adjacent, and a lot of power pop fans certainly love his music.
Yep,
and
but
the melodies are certainly there.
All those years ago when we did the Pop Detective Roadshow across the U.S., he joined the Jelly Bricks and the Dolmans and the Deadbeat Poets on a few gigs, which were great memories. So Willie's just a great guy, great songwriter, and it's going to be nice to have him on the 26th talking about not only his whole body of work, but the 30th anniversary of She, which is a great album. Really good. I look forward to that.
Yeah, for sure. And let's see, what do we have? We have one
August,
more guest after that.
August 2nd we're open, so that could be another playing of some music.
Well, you know what? August 2nd would have been a tough day for me because I was going to go back to New York for my 50th high school reunion, and due to a few potential health issues, hopefully nothing bad will happen, but I have to be mindful of a possibility. That plus the fact that, from what I understand, only about 25 people from our class of 504 are showing up. And the other thing was, I didn't give a shit about most of these people. Why am I going back? Just to show them what I accomplished when they thought I was a nobody? It's not worth it. Why should I even give one crap about what they think? So, as my mastering person, Alan Brownstein, said when I met with him, there are a lot more reasons to say no than there are to say yes. So I'm not going, which means having a guest on that date or just doing anything on that date will be very convenient for me, thankfully.
Yeah, so we'll either play. We'll play music. We'll get another Beat the Bash maybe going, something like that. We'll do something fun. It's always fun here, Material Issues. And then on the 9th of August, we've got a guy that kind of legendary LA glam rock artist from the early 70s, and they've kind of broken up, gotten back together, broken up, and now he's back together with a new album out, Scott Fair's of the Hollywood Stars. And me being a big glam rock fan, I love glam rock. They are classic glam rock, and he's got a lot of stories. He's been around, and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, like I said, I was privileged enough to see their 50th anniversary show in LA at a club nearby called Maui Sugar Mill. It's only about a 10-minute drive, if that, for me from here. So that was great. I didn't really get to talk to the guys, unfortunately, but I'm glad we're going to have him on the program on the 9th. We'll have to figure out a time because my IPO show will be going.
Well, and right now, I mean, we booked it on the 9th for 6 p.m. But if
6 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll be right in the middle of a show at that time.
Yeah, no,
we'll have to figure it out.
Either we'll fly by my own pants, or we were talking about moving it forward a couple weeks to like the 23rd, I think.
23rd would be doable. I'll be coming back from San Diego that day, so I could certainly make it back in time. Well, we probably have to change the time from 6 p.m. to another one, but
Well,
how professional we are. We're talking about this stuff while we're live on the air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there you go. Can't wait for Kim Fowley stories. Yeah, Kim Fowley was involved with Hollywood stars. You're right, Tyler. Well, I mean, we don't know. With sometimes we have to make things work because of the artist schedules.
That's
I know
true.
Scott's going to be touring, and he's going to one of the reasons he was overseas for quite a while, so that was why it was kind of tough to get a specific date booked. But we'll work with it. We'll figure it out.
We
always do. But we just finished up episode 263, which again is a mind blower in my head. But over at materialissues.com, all of the episodes are archived under the live tab. If you missed any of the ones, of course, we talked about some guests on the show tonight. I mean, David Beard even brought up Carney Wilson, and Carney Wilson was a guest on Material.
That's true. She and her husband Rob Bonfilio, a great
number of years ago,
great power pop artist in his own right.
So
they were on.
It's all out there. Materialissues.com, running across the bottom of the screen. If you go there, subscribe, give us a subscribe, give us a like, and let us know that you're digging what we're doing, because we dig what we're doing. I mean, 263 episodes is. I was just thinking about that today, walking the dogs. That's a mind. I don't have 263 of anything, and let alone episodes. I can't even find 263 hair on my head. Okay, maybe a little bit, but
I think you have more than 263 CDs.
Yeah, probably.
You too, Tim. Stay cool, figuratively and literally.
Indeed. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much. Come on back next Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and we're gonna play some new tracks David's got in his collection, and maybe a beat the bash, stump the bash, crush the bash, something like that going on. And we always have a good time with it. So we'll see you then. David, love to Rena.
Love to Cesanati.
Have a great night, everybody. Have enjoy the weekend.
Hope you enjoyed your 4th.
Day after 4th. Yeah.